And so what they did is they contested the spatial configuration of the inner city dry and the outer city wet. And so here's some photos. So the first is in the top left is them negotiating with the government official. And you can see the Channel 3 reporter right there. The community leader who I interviewed a few times is in the black shirt. Second is a symbolic vote that they made on the boats. Third is the community leader standing on the bags itself. And fourth is them actually tearing the bags and letting the water flow. So I asked people what they thought about the protest. And of the 25 interviews, not all of them answered. That's why it's not a division of 4. But it's saying 78% either joined or supported the protest. And some quotes were, yes, I participated. I decided to protest because it was not fair. I wanted to show that I was not happy with the situation. The second added, the big bags were not fair. I was on the boat waiting for the government. I was angry at the government. I can't accept it. I insulted government representatives. And a third added, I protested because they needed to help each other. I couldn't stand the smelly water anymore. So now on to the second community. So this community is a slum community. They don't really have enough money to buy their own housing. So what they do is they live right along the canal, which is state-owned land, but they don't have access to that. I mean, they don't own the land. So they're encroaching upon the land. It's mostly migrants from the northeast. A lot of them, they work at the minimum wage. Many of them are factory workers. And they live right along the canal, which marks the boundary between Pathum Thani, which is part of the Bangkok metropolitan region, and Bangkok and the metropolitan itself. So that's the canal, that kind of shaping arc, and that's where they. And then right below them is Bangkok. You can actually walk across a bridge, and then you're in Bangkok. So so they were flooded for 2 months, and they became similar to Neutral Realm. They became very angry, but this time specifically at the Bangkok government, which is the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, or BMA. They became angry at 3 things. First of all, the Bangkok government built a 2.5-meter sandbag wall in October, even before the floods came, on the southern side of the canal. So here's this bottom left photo is the sandbags, and that's the canal. And then the second thing is they closed the water gate, which blocked water from entering in the city along the canals. And so that's the right photo. And the top left is just kind of is a photo of the community showing that they live right along the canal. So they're very low lying to begin with. I mean, they've lived with floods, but never this high. It was mostly knee high. But this time it was up to neck high or even higher. And the third thing was the government extended that same big bag site from the west to the east. So just so you can't see it, it's right kind of the bottom, right below the bottom right. They extended that big bag site. So the Bangkok government clearly showed that it prioritized keeping the city dry. They didn't want to take any risk to more rain. The difference was very stark. So they organized collectively. They felt the actions were fair. So the community leader, who was a tow truck driver, he joined other communities to protest twice at the big bag site, the big one that I talked about. They protested at a different site, right near the community. Once again, they called the media to negotiate. And while negotiators, protesters were so angry, they moved sections of the wall, about a 10-meter gap. And so the government promised to leave that open if the protesters disbanded, and they did. And according to the community members, this reduced the level of water. Second, they protested again at the water gate. This is a smaller group of protesters, about 30 to 50, and they sent a petition to the Bangkok government, and they later negotiated with the government to open the water gate from 10 centimeters to 40 centimeters. Once again, there's a high level of support. 74% either joined or supported the protest. The people who supported, often they were older, so they stayed behind. Some of them didn't want to for example, one was a government official. They didn't want to get in trouble, they said, with the government, but they supported the protest. I went because I wanted the water level to be reduced. I wanted the big bags to be moved. Another said it was not fair. BMA, or the Bangkok government, blocked the water from not entering and not flooding that side. But here it was badly flooded. BMA should have let the water go. Almost all of them blamed the Bangkok governor for making the flooding worse, and thought that BMA did a good job, poor job. So the community leader, for example, said, the national government wanted to let water flow through Bangkok. The BMA refused, did not want to collaborate. If you ask about 100 people what happened, all of them would say that BMA tricked the national government. So now, just making a few similarities, drawing a few similarities between the cases. First, in these instances, and in others as well, a charismatic and authoritative community leader was needed to initiate and organize these protests. And both these, so I went to another community nearby, the first one, and they didn't protest at all. They were badly flooded, slum community. The community leader fled. He didn't organize anything, and so only a few people joined the other protests. But in both these communities, the community leaders were authoritative figures, popular, became aggrieved, and they were successful in mobilizing support. They also used the media. The tow truck driver had towed a few media figures, and so he had their contact information, and he called them to join the protests. And this was helpful in putting pressure on the government to comply with their demands. And third, this is hard to explain in a short amount of time, but these protests were fueled by memory of recent protests against inequities. And so Thailand is a very highly unequal country, and so especially the red shirts who protested in 2010 against inequalities, they used this recent memory to mobilize people. I'll talk about this a little bit next in the next slide. And fourth, the degree of success was limited. The national government only allowed small holes or only opened the water gate somewhat. I mean, the inner city still remained basically dry. So while the water reduced the result, it was gradual and not full. And so, I mean, so it's a bit qualified. I mean, it was successful, but not fully. And then last, I try to think of some reasons why there were so many protests based on these case studies and also other literature and data. So for example, first of all, as I talked, there was a widespread perception of government ineptitude. A public opinion survey poll done during the height of the floods gave FROC, or the national government's flood relief center, 3.36 out of 10. Very low mark. Second, there was a deep sense of injustice. For example, one community member I interviewed said, the government unfairly divided people during the floods. People in the inner city are big people and big rich companies. They do not protect the small people. Third, there were allegations of corruption. For example, in the procurement of relief packages. This lowered the perception of the government. Last, tensions and angers were revolving around the country's political conflict flare. It's hard to go into this much, but in the second community, a lot of them were red shirts. They supported the national government and were against the Bangkok government. So they thought the political conflict made the flooding worse, because they thought BMA was discriminating against them as red shirts. BMA was protecting its own people, the yellows. So this also was a source of mobilization. And last, protests have become popular in Thailand as a means to pursue political goals over the past decade. And I think if you read the newspaper over the last decade, you'll see there's so many protests going on in Thailand. One academic, Kevin Hewison, says 2005 to 2014 has been one essentially non-stop protest. So local leaders drew upon this recent history of protests during the floods as a means to contest the state's governance of the floods. So in conclusion, I've sought to try to help fill the gap by showing, in the literature, by showing how urban activism during disasters could be seen as the climb of the right to the city. So in this sense, protesters sought to remake the city and correct environmental justices. I ran out of word length to talk much about what happened after the floods, but basically since the 2014 coup in Thailand, there's very little space. The military has been very ruthless and repressive, cracking down on activists. So there's very little space for activism, including in looking at flood mitigation projects, for example. But at least these protests show the way forward to contest unequal power structures. But I admit the conclusion could be improved, so suggestions are most welcome. All right, thank you.